I mean, as soon as we came around there, just like people started shooting. It was just crazy. Uh, and we landed. Thank God it kicked up a bunch of dust because
Mm.
they were ripping at us. Um, and then when I took off from the LZ, before we even touched down, the dudes were shooting off the side of the helicopter. So, and our door gunners, when we're in that mode of flight, they can't really do much.
Right.
You don't want to shoot the good guys in the back. So they kind of put their guns down and just let the guys in the back kind of handle it.
This is the Low Level Hell Podcast, episode 20.
I got your back, man. Forces on the ground, you are clear to fire, take a fire.
IED placers.
Flight 6, lead the 6, fire coming from this mark. Captain, come around, take over trail, take a fire. That was quite a bit of fire there.
Small heading east, going low level.
Welcome to the Low Level Hell Podcast, a program that explores the world of rotary and fixed-wing combat aviation through the exciting stories of the men and women who experienced it firsthand. Now, here's your host, U.S. Army helicopter pilot, Brian Harris.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm Brian. Appreciate you stopping by. Episode 20, as we're getting close to the end of the season, and sometimes it's hard to believe that we've actually gotten 20 episodes in the can. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. It was a lot of fun. I didn't realize talking to this guest that he and I had actually kind of crossed paths. We probably didn't meet in person, but we were on the same base for a handover, and so it's good to hear some experiences from where he's at, and hope you guys will enjoy that. Also want to say thanks to everyone for supporting on Patreon, and of course leaving your comments, your ratings on Apple, and anywhere else that you can. I know some places you can leave a rating and some places you can't. So if you can, I appreciate you taking a few seconds out of your time and doing that for me. It really helps the show out. And of course, again, everyone who supports through Patreon, I cannot thank you enough. I do have some exciting news I want to share. We have finally opened a merchandise store. I've been talking about it and thinking about it for months and months and months. So I finally got off my keister and started that. I'll put a link down in the description below, and I've shared it already on Facebook. And we'll put it up everywhere we can and update the website. But yeah, you guys can take a look there. We've got some shirts and some masks, coffee mugs, things like that. So I've got several designs. Some listeners to the show who do some graphic artist work have been gracious in supporting just through creating some pretty neat designs. So we've thrown those on some shirts, and a big thanks to those guys for supporting the show. And if you have some artistic talent and like to support the show, you can just send me a note at questions@thelowlevelhellpodcast.com, or just send it to Brian at thelowlevelhellpodcast.com. Sometimes the other one doesn't work. I don't really know why. Well, at any rate, we'll jump into the interview now and talk to you on the other side. Brendan Madden joins us. He was a Army Blackhawk pilot, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, Brendan. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. I started flying in 2005. Is when I went through the Blackhawk course at old Mother Rucker, um, and spent most of my time in the 101st and some time at Rucker. I did a tour in Honduras, which was amazing, and that was about it. I closed it out back at Rucker. Pretty good time.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about Flying Hawks. Like, did you pick Blackhawks, or did Blackhawks pick you?
Yeah, no, I picked Blackhawks. So I was enlisted before, and my first sergeant, he pulls me into the office, and I was doing pretty well. We'd just gotten back from OIF 1. Uh, I got sent to sapper school. I was a 12 Bravo combat engineer,
Okay.
and just got back from sapper school. I was doing great. Um, just took over a squad, promotable E6, went to BNOC. So things were going well in my enlisted career. And my first sergeant pulls me into the office and he's like, "Hey, man, like I can tell you're going to get really bored really fast. Like once you're a squad leader, you get that out of the way. And then, it's just kind of admin stuff, once you make platoon sergeant." And, So he's like, man, I think you'd be better off doing something else. He's like, I can get
Right.
you an interview with like the Blackwater guys. You could do private stuff, or I can give you the time that you need to go train for a special forces assessment, or I can get you a really good letter of recommendation for flight.
Hmm.
I was like, ooh, that sounds cool. So, so I was like, yeah, let's do that. And he's like, okay, well, Sergeant Russell, who's another guy I was working with at the time, he said Sergeant Russell wants to go flight too, and he's going to go down and take the test down at the education center on
Right.
Thursday. I think this was like a Monday morning or Tuesday. He's like on Thursday. So why don't you go down with him and take the test too? I was like, all right, man, I'll give it a go. So I had zero helicopter knowledge other than the fact that I knew that the big fan on the top was what kept them in the air. So
Yeah.
I didn't know terms like cyclic and collective, and I don't know if they still ask on the test, but they ask all
Yeah.
that stuff and like which way does the rotors turn and stuff. I had no clue. So I went down and I got, they make a book that has all the
Yeah.
um, sample questions and sample problems, like the complex movements and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So I got a book and I looked it over for a couple hours, and then went and took the test on Thursday, and I passed. I don't think I did very well. I got like 103, and I think passing is 90
Yeah. Something like that.
um, out of 140 or 150, something like that. So
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because people will say you can't study for that test, and I disagree. I studied for that test for about 2 weeks because I was like you know, I didn't know these particular terms, and I remember getting that same probably the same book that you did. I went to the library on Fort Knox and found one, and if nothing else, it prepared me for the types of questions because I think if you go into that test cold, you know, you're going to spend a few of those valuable minutes just trying to figure out what is this question trying to get me to do? Because I remember there were some that like you had to like
definitely,
figure out the lines, like which line is longer, and you know, there's some things you kind of had to decode, and it's you know, it's 2 or 3 minutes that you're wasting trying to figure it out instead of just answering the question. So,
yeah, definitely. I think that was a big part of it because I didn't I
mm,
didn't finish all my complex movement questions just
mm,
because it was taking so long. I probably should have studied a lot more, but I was just like, hey, let's do it. You know.
yeah, yeah,
So, but I passed and I got my letter of recommendation. Um, and that's kind of another funny story. My first sergeant, really well connected guy. Um, he he puts me in touch with this contractor that works with Chinooks over in the 160th.
mm,
And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to get you a really good letter of recommendation. You just come meet me at the compound, and I'll take you on, and we'll set you up a little interview, and go from there." So I meet him at the compound, and my first sergeant took me over to the compound, met the guy at the gate. He signed me in, and we go to this guy's office. He's got all kinds of cool pictures on the wall, and I had no idea who the guy was. But we sit down and we just have a chat and tell him a little bit about my career, what I've done so far, and uh, apparently he liked me enough because he wrote me a killer letter recommendation.
mm,
Um, so he's like, "Yeah, just look for it. I'll send you a copy here in a week or so." I was like, "Cool, thanks a lot," and I left. And my first sergeant picked me back up, and he's like, "Hey, how'd it go?" And I said, went pretty good." He said, "He'll write my letter." He's like, "Okay, great, man. Do you have any idea who that guy was?" And I was like, "Not a clue." And he's like, "That's Carl Meyer, the
mm,
legendary Carl Meyer of OH6 or AH6 fame, from
mm,
Mogadishu and everything."
mm.
So that was pretty cool. And I,
Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
I hate to say that I had no idea who Carl Meyer was at the time, but I was just some idiot ground pounder, 12 Bravo out there, just living my best life. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's who wrote my letter. And looking back, I mean, I was probably a shoe in at that point, um,
Hmm.
having that
Yeah,
letter
that helps.
recommendation. But
Yeah, certainly.
yep,
you were at 101st as a combat engineer, so you probably spent a lot of time on Hawks.
Yeah, yeah, we did a lot of stuff on Blackhawks. You know,
Mhm.
I bought in 100% to all the stuff, the army. You know, like I was HUA, like hard charging.
Right.
I was so proud to be air assault. You know, all I wanted to do was go to air assault school as soon as I got to 101st. I was a Rakkasan. You know, we were attached to 3rd Brigade, so
Mhm.
um, I just I was drawing Tories on everything. You know, it was great. So I really I ate it up, man. I loved it. And the first time we got to ride on a Blackhawk, I was like in heaven. You know, I think that was during air assault school.
Right.
They take you on a little orientation flight. And I was just like, oh, this is awesome. But I actually come from some of my family are aviators as well. And before I even joined the army, I wanted to fly, but I didn't really think I could do it. I don't know if that
Right.
makes sense.
Oh,
They
yeah.
have a program for the Marines called the Jump Program, or they used to, where you it's kind of like ROTC, but you do it like your junior, senior year of college, and you're
Mhm.
guaranteed a flight school spot if you qualify for it. So
Mhm.
that was my plan all along. Um, but you know, I don't know, some things happened. I found out college really wasn't for me, so I joined the army instead. You know.
So, tell us about your first assignment. So you came out of flight school. Where'd you go?
Back to the 101st. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, like I said, I was so proud to be in the 101st and, you know, part of that team, had that combat patch on my shoulder. So, um, I wanted to go back to the 101st and be the guy that flew around guys like me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, uh, so yeah, I wanted Blackhawks and I wanted Campbell. And at the time, you know, it was 2006. That was the surge time. So,
Mhm.
if you wanted Blackhawks and either Bragg or Campbell, you got it because you know those high op tempo units at the time, you know, were just hurting for guys.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
um, and everybody else wanted OH-58s or Apaches, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm pretty safe with Blackhawks and Campbell. So yeah, I got it. Went to the 5th Battalion of the 101st and started my aviation journey there.
So you were when you were prior enlisted, what was your rank? You were E5 or 6?
I was a E5, but I made points in walk school.
Okay.
So I got a, I guess I got a promotion. I got a couple months of paying, getting paid as an E6.
All right.
So,
So you show up to your first aviation unit. Now you're a Woj.
oh man, you know it's like I'm sure a lot of other warrant officers feel the same way. You're going from we're warrant officers, so we're kind of high achievers already
Yeah.
to meet the vetting and the screening process and everything, and then you know you're coming from somewhere where you're doing well, and then they
Mm.
put you in this pool of other guys who are just as good as you, and most of them are better, or some of them are better. And it was a hard thing to deal with for me, you know, because I was used to being like the poster child of the company, you know,
Yeah.
and then going there as a Woj and you're nothing again, you know. uh, that was kind of tough.
And for listeners who don't know, we're talking about the call them Wojes, warrant officer junior grade. So essentially, new pilots showing up, uh, brand new warrant officers. You're kind of just the new guy, and you're gonna get stuck with the go make coffee and go sandbag for the MTP, the maintenance test pilot, and just do odd jobs, stock the fridge, things like that. So um, yeah, it can be a little bit of a culture shock for people. I mean, for me, I had been a commission guy and then went warrant. So my last job before flight school was a company command, and then I show up to my next unit as a Woj. And yeah, it can be a little bit of a like, oh my gosh, what happened? Where am I?
Yeah, definitely. You know, it was actually really good for uh, my personal development, you know, because
Hmm.
that identity of Sergeant Madden, you know, it's like I had to leave that behind, and it took
Right.
me a little while. I remember this is a funny story. We were in Afghanistan, which was where we deployed. I think I got there in May, and I got through most of my progression, and then we deployed to Afghanistan the next like January, I believe. I think
Hmm.
I can't really remember, but anyways, I was given the crew brief, and one of the crew chiefs on duty with us was a staff sergeant, really good guy. And I was telling him, I said, yeah, if we go down, we're like doing the evac plan and everything. And I was like, yeah, if we go down, I'm taking one of the 240 Bravos, and I'll take the kit. And he's like, whoa, 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 chief, like, why do you get one of the 240 Bravos? They're in the back with us. And I said, because I can hit an accurate initial burst at 600 meters, 240 Bravo, like just thinking I'm hot shit. And he's like,
Right.
okay, Superman, and that name stuck with me. Uh, in the 101st, my nickname was Superman. But it was pretty funny.
So going through progression, I mean, tell us a little bit about, we've had a lot of attack and recon guys. I'm a 58, 64 guy. So tell us a little bit about training a new Blackhawk pilot. Like, what is your focus?
So I was in a air assault company. So our big thing, the legacy of 5th Battalion was that, you know, Task Force 160th was taken from 5th Battalion. So,
Mm,
um, and there was a long um, tradition that the 160th would recruit heavily from 5th Battalion. Um, so there was a lot of guys in 5th Battalion who had been there. That was um, their only Blackhawk duty ever. They call it homesteading now or whatever. Like you could do
mm,
that back then. If you wanted to be in the 101st and the 101st 5th Battalion wanted you there,
mm.
then you could stay as long as you want. I actually knew a guy who was an untracked W4 in 5th Battalion. Got
Wow.
there as a Woj, and spent a lot of time there, and ended up retiring. They told him, they said, hey, you either got to go to a like a track, or you got to retire. And he was like, yeah, I'm not tracking. I'm retiring. So he
That's
just got out.
insane.
Yeah.
And for everyone, a track means there's four basic tracks: is safety, instructor, pilot, uh, TAC ops. Of course, I guess they changed the name of TAC ops there, and then maintenance test pilot. But I mean, normally you get tracked at W2, pretty relatively junior G4 and officer 2. You're talking about a guy who's he's retiring. He didn't even track. That's crazy.
Yeah. It was legendary. And when I ended up going down to Fort Rucker and tracking IP, and
Yeah.
when I was down there, we'd sit through these OPDs, and they're like, we're not going to have any more untracked W4s. And I was like, hey, I know who you're talking about. But great guy, great guy.
Sure.
They really lost a real one when they forced him out, but really excellent pilot. But yeah, so we trained for the air assault thing. Um, there was an air of superiority, like we were 160th minus. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like
yeah.
we were
JV.
we were 5th Battalion. You know what I mean? We're like
Yeah.
the junior 160th. But I mean, I didn't feel that way, but I think a lot of people did.
Sure.
It was a real the guys were really proud to be over there. So that's what we practiced. Was a lot of time on target stuff, the planning process, uh, doing your different planning cycles and stuff like that, and then briefing the air mission brief and all that stuff. Um, was what the focus was on. Because the flying is not the hard part. It's all the
Right.
coordination and the moving parts and everything of an air assault.
For people who don't know the term assault, because this confused me when I first came in aviation. I think the lay person, when they hear the word assault, they're thinking of shooting stuff and blowing stuff up, but it's really about delivering uh, troops onto the objective or very close to the objective. And So assault battalions, that's what they really focus on is large scale formation movements, battalions and brigades and things like that, of just picking up hundreds of troops and cycling aircraft through and picking up a bunch of dudes and dropping them off somewhere and coming back, grabbing some more, going back in. And yeah, the level of coordination. I was a Alpha 3 OC at JRTC, so the ops OC down there, and to watch these large scale air assaults. I mean, the amount of planning that has to go into that, like you said, the flying part's relatively easy. Though I don't think we give lift guys enough credit when it comes to landing on the LZ, first time. A flight of 6 aircraft coming in the dark, never been to the LZ before, and sticking the
Yeah.
landing, on the way in, because dumb 58 guys like me, we got to circle overhead like 2 or 3 times before we feel comfortable landing somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
but the sheer amount of preparation and planning that has to go into these large scale movements, and it's down to the minutes. I mean, it's because it's fuel, right? I mean, it's a matter of, I've got this many dudes, so I can only carry this much fuel. And I've watched air assaults at JRTC slide 5 6 hours to the right, all
Oh
because
yeah.
of a 2 minute, 3 minute screw up, because the troops weren't ready on the in the right spot on the PZ, the pickup zone, to get on the aircraft, and some smart Blackhawk guy figured out the math and said, well, we don't have enough gas now because of the screw up. Now we got to go get more gas, and it becomes a real cluster. So that planning is huge.
Yep. Uh, yeah. That's the fun stuff. Not really fun.
Yeah.
but yeah, like when you coordinate all that stuff uh and it comes together and you go and
Mm,
execute it, man, it is a good feeling. I feel like I'm taking care of those guys, you know what I mean? When we put them in the right place with, at the right time, like they can at least trust us until they get off the helicopter, that we're going to do them right, so I take a lot of pride in that. And I think that was that level of the air of superiority from the 5th Battalion and the 101st was from that, like they were all of the same mind, we're taking care of soldiers, putting them where they need to go at the right time, you know. But something that really blew my mind was I went to the 101st expecting there was going to be guys from the 101st in the back of my helicopter. But then when
mm,
we deployed, it wasn't the case. I think we had like some
right.
10th Mountain guys that were supporting on the ground. And I think to all that modular army stuff that they were doing back then, just putting different brigades with whoever was there at the time. Um, but we did get to support some 101st guys, I think, in my second deployment, quite a bit. So that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, the plug and play made it difficult to train and fight as you train, as they talk about, because everyone kind of trains a little bit differently, and especially with something like an air
Yeah,
assault. Because if I spent most of my time at Bragg, so we did a lot of the same type of stuff, and then you go overseas and you're with guys from First Cab Division, or some other
yep,
heavy brigade, and they don't do that stuff, and
yeah,
it gets a little funky. So yeah, absolutely.
yep,
Uh, so tell us a little bit about your first deployment. You said Afghanistan.
yeah. Afghanistan. I was the Woj. I think I got promoted right before we deployed,
Mm,
and I absolutely hated it. It was awful. We got stuck. So we were an assault company, and we got broken off. I don't know how the task force structure got organized, but we got stuck with the um, the GSAB, the other
mhm.
battalion, 6th Battalion. So we were supposed to be an assault company with the GSAB, but the GSAB guys were like, "No, you guys are going to do the other stuff, and we're going to do the assaults."
Oh
So
well.
there was a big competition there. Um, so I was a little jaded, during that deployment because we did a lot of like VIP. Um, I was a Woj, so I got stuck flying with the SP a lot, and I'm pretty sure he really did not like me. So so that was fun. He asked me about chaff one time, and we're flying. We'd just taken off from Bagram, And he's like, okay, Woj Madden, or I can't remember what he called me. He didn't call me Brendan, but he said, okay, Woj, tell me about the chaff. I'm like, the chaff? Like, why? Why do you want me
Yeah.
to tell you about that? We're not in a radar threat environment. He's like, well, you need to know it. I was like, okay, well, I when I study, I don't study anything about chaff. He's like, okay, got it. So that made it super awkward for the rest of the 6 hour flight. But then, like a week later, I'm on the schedule with him again. And I'm like, I hope he doesn't ask me about chaff. And first thing he does, we take off, start flying. He's like, okay, tell me about the chaff. I'm like, seriously? Like, I still didn't look at it. And he's like, you know what? When the SP asks you a question, you don't know the answer, you're flying with them again, I'll suggest you go and get that answer. And I was like, man, it didn't make sense to me why he's asking me these questions about chaff,
Hmm.
um, but I never looked it up. I still don't know about chaff. So,
Well, every instructor
but
pilot, and you know this because you are one, or were one, is every instructor pilot seems to have their little niche that they focus on. That was the trick on a check ride, is figure out, well, what does Mr. So and so like to talk about, you know?
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, but we flew a lot in that deployment. We were doing like 8 to 9 hour days, just flying all over the place. We had some extra wojes, so um, it I still only got about 450 hours, which is about average for that deployment because we were doing those 8 and 9 hour days. But I only flew like 3 to 4 days a week. So a lot of the other guys that were doing those 8 or 9 hour days and they didn't have any time off, like the Apache guys, they were so short staffed that they they had to, like, it was hard for them to take a day off to get their
Oh
reset
yeah.
day, for the crew rest cycles and everything. So they were getting like between 700 and 800 hours on the same deployment.
Yeah, we were doing like 10 days on, 1 day off. I think on my first deployment, 2006. And
Yeah,
then 2009, it wasn't quite that bad, but it was definitely 6 or 7 days and then a day off type thing.
yeah. So you were at Bragg?
Yep, yep. I was in 182 and then it reflagged to 117.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. So I'm sure, like, we ripped out, like, I think we replaced uh 282, the caveman, whoever the caveman was.
Yeah, yeah.
We
Bravo,
replaced them
Bravo
both
282.
times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually with them in Tarancalt in 2010.
Oh, okay.
Uh, yeah, I was the troop commander for the 58 troop that was cross attached to the Apache battalion, which owned also the Caveman company. So yeah, we did the whole task force thing, which
Yeah.
which can be
Yeah.
funky because, like you said, you were with the GSAB, which is the General Support Aviation Battalion for those listening who don't know, and that's kind of the hodgepodge battalion of Chinooks and Medevac and the what is it normally Alpha Company, I think, is like the General Support Blackhawk company.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're the guys who are supposed to do kind of the VIP and stuff. So you should have been doing the assault stuff.
Yeah, and that's what our big hang up was, but I mean, I was a Woj, and the Woj isn't going to do any of the assault stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So it was kind of boring in that regard. I thought I was going to be doing a lot of different stuff,
Hmm.
but it was mostly just, hey, take this guy out here and drop him off and wait around and then go pick him up an hour later, and a lot of VIP um,
Yeah.
PAX movements all throughout the AO, which is a huge amount of planning, in itself, because you got
Oh
like
yeah.
7 guys need to go here, and then 3 get off, and then you're going to pick up 4, and then 6 of those people that are now on your aircraft are going over to this other place,
Yeah.
so it was like when you had to plan that, that's one of the other big jobs as a Woj. You get all the air mission requests, and you have to have this big stack of papers, with everybody who wants to go where, and then you got to plan out the mission so everybody gets there, when they're supposed to get there. So
Yeah, it's not a sexy job, but it's there's a lot going on. It's pretty complex, and you like you said, you got these onesies and twosies going all over, and then of course you got the strap hangers who probably try to jump on. I know I've done that more than once. Find a ring route
oh yeah,
aircraft and jump on because I need to get somewhere, and I didn't get schedule it. So
yep, yep. So that was challenging. And then the and in that AO, the altitudes were a lot higher. I think the base altitude at Bagram was what 5,500 or something like that, five
mm,
thousand feet.
yeah, yeah,
So a lot of those other places, were taking off with a full load at 7,000 8,000 feet.
yeah,
Uh, we're doing our power checks and everything, and it was challenging. I think flying in those mountains definitely um, developed me as a pilot for sure.
sure.
It's a lot of fun too. Some of the most beautiful countryside I've ever seen in my life.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's definitely some interesting. I mean, there's places there in the mountains where it's like something out of Star Wars because you just can't fathom. These mountains or this valley looks like this. It's just looks like from another world.
Oh yeah,
But those altitudes too. I mean, I don't know what the base altitude at Campbell is, but it can't be that high. I mean, at Bragg it was like 400 feet or something. So to suddenly then go to now we're operating at 4,500 feet, and we got to get to
yep,
5,500 just to get out of this bowl that our base is in. Yeah, it's very different.
yep. It was a good time.
What was your second deployment? So you went to Afghanistan again in what 2010?
Yeah, 2010, 11. Uh,
Okay.
Second deployment. I always tell people it was the most fun I never want to have again. So,
Right.
because it was intense. So if like I don't know if can say all this stuff, but Task Force 66 was out there, and
Oh yeah.
we were direct support for the Australian SAS,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, because you
by
were a
that
Terran cop.
time, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And by that time, I was a PC, pilot in command, flight lead, and all that stuff. So I was in the thick of it.
yeah.
So
Yeah, that's I agree with you. That was for me fun wise was probably the best deployment, and it had a lot to do with where we were and the customer that we worked with because we had the same guys. I mean, some of those guys I still talk to this day.
yeah, yeah,
The task force guys. But just the real dynamic mission set and being able to just you're away from the flagpole, I think was the best part.
yeah,
And
definitely.
you just kind of got to just do work, and it was all the stuff that you practice for and train for. And unfortunately for you guys, I think you kind of showed up. I mean, you were still doing work, but what we noticed on our deployment before that, we were the first ones to get up there and kind of do that stuff at the tempo that we were. And in the first couple months, I mean, it was game on. Like it was constantly just catching bad guys. And then after a while, they
Yeah,
kind of got wise to, oh, four Blackhawks just took off with, 258s. So somebody's about to get nabbed, and they would kind of react and it slowed down a little bit. So, but I mean, tell us a little bit about that. Like, what was that like from the lift perspective? You're carrying these these pretty awesome dudes onto these missions. Tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. That's every lift pilot's or every assault pilot's like dream job. That deployment was just it had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. We lost an aircraft, and then our sister company, Bravo Company, they lost an aircraft doing a similar mission with the SEALs. So um, it was really rewarding, but it was really really stressful at the same time. So, um, but yeah, it's your dream job. You're putting these guys, um, literally landing in some dude's backyard, and the SAS is going out to snatch them up. Um, so and the op tempo maybe took a small dip when we first got there, but man, it picked right up because we were doing 2 to 3 mission sets a month. In
Hmm.
the height of the fighting season,
Right.
uh, doing that stuff. Uh, so yeah, we kept your legacy going strong. So, and you were talking about the organizational structure. This was another. Uh, I don't know if it was good or bad, but at the time we thought it was great. So we we were attached to the Apache task force.
Yeah.
So the Apache battalion commander was in charge of the task force. Great guy,
Mhm.
Colonel Haskins, and he didn't really know what lift guys did.
Yeah.
So he just let us do whatever we wanted to do. And that's kind of a stretch, but we told him, hey, these are our capabilities. This is what we want to do. And he'd
Sure.
straight up look you in the eye and say, can you guys do that? We'd be like, yeah, we can do that. He's like, okay. So we kind of had free reign with him um, to really take the fight to the enemy.
Mhm.
So I know when the other brigade from the 101st replaced us, they put a bunch of restrictions on them, like they had to be 500 meters from any target building.
Mhm.
Um, they they couldn't do the rapid planning cycles like we were doing.
Mm.
So they put a lot of restrictions on them, and I think they kind of dampened the dynamic that we had going.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. You're just sitting in a room with a bunch of operators just waiting for something to happen, and then
Yeah.
we go develop the fight. So
Yeah, that was some of the
that
most
was
fun is just kind of hanging out with those dudes and because we would do like these week-long mission windows and you already
yeah,
you already did all the briefs, you knew the target, you knew the target area and you were just kind of you go pre-flight the aircraft and then go hang out at their compound and just basically wait for somebody to yell Irene, and run out and spool up and go. The
yeah,
big question is, did they invite you guys to their barbecues on Sundays? They had the meat
yeah.
spread.
They
Oh yeah.
did. Um, the the first group we were with, um, those guys were like super super professional.
Mhm.
So they didn't hang out with us too much
Mm.
because I don't know. I guess we didn't really have that bond with them, but we did a lot of work for them. Um, there was the Battle of Tezak, the big where I don't know if you still talk to those guys, like the Ben Robert Smith thing,
Mm,
where he
yeah.
got the Victoria Cross.
Right.
So that was with that first group that we were with, and
Okay.
they really, after that mission, they generated so much like intel, like intel was going back to Pakistan, like dudes from Pakistan are calling like, hey, why did this happen? It was a pretty big fight. uh and some of the effects from that battle, like there was that route Bear that went
Oh yeah.
from Count like through the pass down to
Yep.
Kandahar,
Yep.
and guys were getting killed on that route, like I don't know if it was daily, but at least weekly, the
Yeah.
IED
Right
attacks
at
and
that
everything.
halfway point.
Yep. um and that was around Shawalikot, the Chinartu area, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So after that big battle, there wasn't another IED attack on Route Bear for over a year.
Oh wow.
So we really did a good job, and that was like the last big mission uh, for that group before they ripped out with the new group. So then
Mm-hmm.
a new group shows up, and they were uh, just as professional, but their attitude was a little bit different. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if they were like a younger group of dudes, but they invite us to more barbecues, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, so and then the enemy really didn't want to fight after that big battle, the Battle of Tezak. They would we went on a couple more mission sets, and literally um, the the ISR was relaying us back information, from what the guys on the ground were picking up. We're saying the enemy, and
Mm-hmm.
they started calling us the monsters. They said, "Hey, the monsters are coming. The monsters are coming. Like, just put down your guns. Like, hide your weapons. Like, do not
Yeah.
fight them. They will kill us all." So that was, I guess, kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well, it's funny because we had a similar experience where we were just north of TK doing something with I think it was either the commandos the Aussie commandos or just the base Aussie infantry guys? I know it wasn't the task
Yeah.
force dudes, but we showed up and the JTAC comes over the radio and he's laughing and he says, "So they saw you coming and they, it's 58s and they called out on the radio. The guy yelled out. He said, "The special helicopters are here. Run for your lives."
Oh,
so,
nice.
so yeah, we always like to hear those things, and I think they called us the soulless ones in the 58s
Oh,
because they could
really?
see us, and we all wore those mandible shields.
Yeah.
And I think with the 58s, I could actually see the pilots because we'd get down low and look at them and stuff, and so they just see this this faceless creature looking down at them and stuff. And so, yeah, it's funny these little
Yeah.
nicknames that come out. Did you fly that battle of what would you call it?
Tezak. Yeah. Yeah.
Tezak? Were you on that mission?
I was.
Well, I'm sure there's people listening right now that are going to be like, I need to know everything about that. So what can you tell us about that?
It was. We weren't really expecting that to happen at all. I don't think anybody was, but we were, like you said, we were supporting the commandos,
Mm-hmm.
and they were doing some like week long like clear and route bear, going up in and like engaging some of these villages and stuff, having little shuras everywhere,
Yeah.
like the hearts and minds things, just regular coin stuff. And they just started developing this situation in this valley, and it was like the next valley over where all the commandos were. They started generating some SIGINT that, hey, like, let's get everybody together. We're going to go attack these guys. So, the SAS is like, oh, I think not. So we're going to beat them to the punch. So we got spun up real quick and, had, same 4 helicopter package, and just went into this valley in the morning, and it was a daylight assault. Um, and it was like you poked a hornet's nest.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as we came around, because I'm sure you remember all those valleys in that area. They all ran like north south.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
like we're coming from the north, and the winds were always coming from the north. So we had to come down and then circle back and go turn back to the north to go in those valleys,
Mm-hmm.
to remain like low level. So it was daylight, and we were doing like offset targets. So one helicopter was landing in to the north for a blocking position. The
Mm-hmm.
Chalks 2 and 3 were in the middle, and then the fourth helicopter was kind of far to the south. And I think I was Chalk 3. We landed. I mean, as soon as we came around there, just like people started shooting. It was just crazy. Uh, and we landed. Thank God it kicked up a bunch of dust because
Mm.
they were ripping at us. And then when I took off from the LZ, before we even touched down, the dudes were shooting off the side of the helicopter. So, and our door gunners, when we're in that mode of flight, they can't really do much.
Right.
You don't want to shoot the good guys in the back. So they kind of put their guns down and just let the guys in the back kind of handle it. Unless we're being like directly engaged, then of course they're going to suppress.
Sure.
But once we're on the ground, those guys are getting out and everything. And I took off because I was on the controls, and I was just like, man, there's like everybody shooting, at any helicopter, they're just shooting at it.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy comes out of this little hut, and I'm kind of, uh, I don't even know what to call it, yanking and banking, like just trying to stay low and make a hard target. This dude pops out of this hut, man, and just rips about 4 rounds in the helicopter. The first of which went literally between my feet,
Mm.
Into the cockpit area, and I thought we got hit with like an RPG because it was so loud. That's what I remember is when that bullet came through. It was just so loud, and like little pieces of the floor like hit me in the face. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I don't have legs right now. So I had to like transfer the flight controls, and like you know they teach you how to check for blood,
Yeah.
in basic training. So you're touching your legs, looking at your fingers, and I was like,
Yeah.
shit, man. So no, my legs are still here. So it was crazy though. It actually went like, I think I had left pedal in, so it went underneath my right foot and
Hmm.
through the boot, through the little carbon fiber panel that sits in between the pedals,
Right.
and then through the opposite boot in front of my left foot.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was no, behind my left foot. I can't remember, but that was pretty cool. I still have the little. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. I still have the little bullet casing
No, that's okay.
that
Yeah.
they pulled out of the. Um, they were asking for me or for it, and I was like, oh no, I don't know
Yeah.
where that went. So I keep it in my wallet, like a little reminder. But
Yeah.
yeah, they gave me the boots too, and the um, little piece of fiberglass. So I got that stashed away, for the
Nice.
grandkids.
Yeah.
So
No, I got shot in 2006 while flying, and I've got the bullet and one of the other bullets that they pulled out of the aircraft. So same thing. I don't think I'm supposed to have it, but
yeah,
you can come take it from me.
yeah, come take it, right? But yeah, every single one of our helicopters had pretty significant battle damage.
Yeah.
Um, so we all got shot up. I know the first the Chalk One, they did a lot. I can't remember. They had a tally going of how many RPGs got shot at them,
Hmm.
but they were the ground commander was on that aircraft, and so they dropped off the OP, and then they had like a aerial reaction force,
Right.
a couple guys. Um, so they drop off the OP, and I think that was like a sniper and a couple machine gunners, and they kind of opened up the battle. But then they were just hanging out, trying to coordinate any ARF support that was needed,
Hmm.
and they just, I think it was like 9 or 10. I can't even remember how many RPGs it was, but it was a lot.
And to put that into context for people listening, I mean that's pretty uncommon. I can't remember any air assaults that I covered where the the lift guys took any fire. I mean, maybe a sporadic round or two, but I mean, the type of fire that you're talking about, that was not commonplace for an assault. So that's
Yeah,
pretty
no,
substantial. Yeah.
yeah.
I
It
do
was
remember
it was
one raid
also
where, yeah, it's one of those things where it's awesome when you get away with it, because you look
yeah.
back and you're like, oh, that was so cool. Um, I do remember one raid where the guys were coming in, they were, 2 minutes out from the LZ, and the door gunner spotted something, which was pretty cool because it was at night, and engaged the target. But the area that you're
Yeah.
talking about, was it on the east side of Bear, or do you remember?
Yes. Yeah, it was on
Okay,
the east side
yeah,
of
I know
Bear.
exactly the
Yeah.
area you're talking about. Yeah, I spent.
Once you cross Bear, man, it's all no man's land out there.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we would cruise out there every now and then. I mean, we spent most of our time on Bear, but I remember a couple days where we were like, "Hey, let's just go a little bit further," and we would go in that area. And yeah, there's a ton of little villages, and like you said, it's all those
Oh
north-south
yeah.
running valleys, and
Yeah.
I cringe now, thinking back because I mean, hell, this was probably less than a year before what you're talking about, so there was definitely bad guys everywhere, and we knew that. I mean,
Oh
Bear
yeah.
was a bad place, but I cringe to think back to us going over there just on our own, willy nilly, 258s, alone and unafraid.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, and I laughed too
Yeah.
when you mentioned the commandos, kind of picking, just going out for a week or two. They would do the same thing when we were there. It would just be like this random pick a direction, and they would just go, for like
Yep.
2 weeks and just kick whatever hornet's nest they could find.
Yep.
And generally, most of our engagements were because of that, because they would just go out and get into it with guys. I remember they entered a village one time, and the villagers had asked them if they were still fighting Russians. Because that's
Oh
how
yeah.
isolated these places are. They don't, they don't know what's going on. They don't care. They're just in a village in the middle of the mountains. They don't know. Um,
Yep.
yeah, so that's funny to see. They were up to their old shenanigans.
Yeah, same thing happened with us. We landed for this little Shura, and the guys got on the helicopter, or I guess we were picking them up, and they were like, "Hey man, you'll never believe it. They thought we were Russians." And I was like, "Man, that's crazy. These dudes haven't seen like a westerner in like, I don't know, 20,
Yeah,
30 years." So,
yeah. Yeah, it's wild just to think about it, because too some of these villages they're not that far, from places from like Kandahar and things like that, but it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. They could be light years away for all they care because they don't really leave their village, or if they do, it's just go the
No.
next village over. But
Yeah,
wow,
they're definitely isolated. Hence
yeah,
the problem with the whole central government thing. They're like, what's
yeah,
the president gonna do for me? Like I still think there's Russians flying around.
yeah,
You
exactly. I
know.
mean, how do you exert
So
any sort of governmental influence on that? Ugh.
exactly.
So how many more deployments did you do following that one?
That was it.
Okay.
Um, after that one, man. Um, well, after that big battle, we lost the helicopter, and that messed with me pretty. I mean, it's hard for me. So um, I was kind of over the whole Afghanistan thing. I was like, if I can avoid it, uh, I'm just gonna try to. That kind of sounds bad. It's not like I was like dodging deployments, but it was like, hey, if I don't have to do that again,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not gonna, I'm not gonna chase it down. Try to
yeah.
go deploy again. But um, I went to Fort Rucker after that deployment to go teach, and then after Fort Rucker, I got a Honduras deployment, not deployment, but a rotation in
Hmm.
Honduras.
Yeah. So what's that about? I mean, I've known guys that gone down there, but I don't know too much about the mission.
Man, uh, the guys who create the missions don't know too much about the mission either. So uh, we were all speculating um, what our actual mission was, and nobody could really give us a solid answer. So um, I would hear like before I left, they're like, "Oh yeah, we intercept drug Cessnas, all the time, and
Hmm.
uh, and we do counter drug stuff." And when I got down there, they were like, "Yeah, we don't do counter drug stuff," but I think it's just to provide like a strategic presence in the region.
Right.
Like they have a huge runway there. It was C5 capable, but now it's an international airport,
Mm,
or it's being turned into an international airport. But it was like one of the only C5 capable runways in the region.
mm.
So
You're
I
just
think
kind of
that,
popping a squad on it to hold it essentially.
yeah, I think so. We did a lot of like VIP support. There's some congressional delegations would come, and uh, I don't know why they would ever want to fly on a Blackhawk, for 2 hours to go to Guatemala. But
Hmm.
we would take them out there, or we would fly out there and just kind of be there to take them around to the different sites in Guatemala or Nicaragua or El Salvador.
Hmm.
Um, so, but it was good time. Um, it was definitely probably some of the most challenging flying um, that I've ever faced. Because again, it's like Afghanistan, but not as um, like the mountains aren't as big. Like and nobody's shooting at you.
Yeah.
But the weather reporting there is none. I think there's 3 or 4 reporting stations. There's one at um, the 3 major airports in the country, and then there was
Mm,
one army or military reporting station out in the jungle. So there's no radar down there either. So any kind of storms that are popping up, the weather guy's looking at a satellite feed that's sometimes up to like 45 minutes old.
uh,
So um, I've gone out and they're like, oh yeah, no thunderstorms, and we're flying instruments, and all of a sudden we're stuck in a thunderstorm cell, like getting tossed around. He's
yeah.
like, I thought you said no storms. And he's like, oh, yeah, that was an hour ago. I'm like, well, thanks.
Yeah. Well, you've not had the full Army pilot experience until you've been lied to by an Air Force weather guy.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I
Definitely.
remember taking one out of our headquarters building in Iraq on my last deployment and showing him like, look at that thing on the other side of the runway. You can barely see it. You just briefed me it's 5 miles.
Yep.
Come on, guy. Yeah, well, when you see them go outside and look up, that's always the best.
Yeah,
Very
definitely.
inspiring. Oh, okay, great. Um, but it sounds like, I mean, it's kind of grown up flying though, because now you've got to be able to make good adult decisions, and instead of just kind
Oh,
of leaning on
definitely.
somebody else. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, there was one week I got stuck in the jungle for like literally a week because the weather was just so bad.
Hmm.
And then finally, like the Chinook guys, so they have a couple Fox model Chinooks down there, and then we have uh, shit. We had two Alpha Pluses,
Hmm.
and which I think were the last two Alpha Pluses in the active duty Army inventory, and then we had a couple Limas. But we didn't have any kind of moving map or terrain avoidance or anything like that. So these Fox model Chinooks, they got all the G Wiz stuff, the glass cockpits, the fully coupled flight director, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
these dudes are like pushing us to like try to pick through this weather. And it's like, man, like, nah, no thanks. It's just me up here with, I was flying with like some Woj straight out of progression, and I'm like, hey man, we're not, we're not gonna, we're just gonna chill here on the ground until it's good. But finally,
Hmm.
he's like, hey man, we're gonna try it, and if we can make it out, we're just gonna go. And I was like, dude, I was the AMC of that mission. I'm like, hey man, like, I'm telling you not to do that, but if you do it, like, go for it.
Right.
Whatever. But it's different. They pop into a cloud. They're fully coupled.
Yeah,
Like we pop
exactly.
into a cloud. Now we're committed to instruments.
Hmm.
So it's a bit more of a significant emotional event when
Yeah.
you're flying a Lima. The round dials and stuff.
So finished up your career back at Rucker.
Uh, yes, and then I went back to Rucker after the Honduras thing. I was I wanted to go back to Campbell. So when I was at Fort Rucker before I went to Honduras, I didn't get the transition to the Mike model.
Hmm.
So um, that actually got me the job in Honduras because I was a Lima guy. Um, but getting a job leaving Honduras was more difficult. They're like, hey, if you want to be a Mike model guy, you can go to like Bliss, Riley, or somewhere else, Hood, I think. And I was
Mm.
like, ugh, no, thank you. You know, they wouldn't give me Bragg, they wouldn't give me Campbell, they wouldn't even give me Drum. But that the branch manager at the time, they were really they did a lot of damage to the Army aviation community, the Blackhawk community at least,
Mm.
because their I don't know how to say it, their attitude was not to
Right.
take care of soldiers. It was just needs of the Army, needs of the Army. I actually knew two guys who were both the same profile, like both W3s, both IP, SP, IE. They had all their credentials. Like you pull up the ORB, and their ORBs are very similar. Like
Hmm.
either one of them could do whatever job that they got sent to.
Right.
Well, one wanted Bragg, and the other one wanted Drum. But the one that wanted Drum got Bragg, and the one that wanted
Naturally.
Bragg got Drum. And I was just like, how does that even happen? Like
Yeah.
you got two dudes, same profiles. They want to go to, and they wouldn't let them switch or anything. So,
Oh my
um,
goodness.
so I couldn't find a job that would get me the Mike model. Um, but when DES came down to Honduras to do their assessment or whatever they do,
Mm.
um, I just sat there and talked to him for like 2 or 3 hours. Just like mentorship and
Hmm.
um, just chatting about what the Army could be and how we're doing things uh, the wrong way in a lot of places. And he's like, dude, you want to come work at DES, man? I like your ideas. And I was like, oh yeah, that
Mm.
sounds cool. Um, so he said, yeah, just I can't since I was just W3, it wasn't promotable yet. He's like, most of them are W3P or W4 slots, but if you get down to Fort Rucker, we're hurting for guys. I can pluck you off the flight line. I
Hmm.
was like, okay, well, let me call the branch manager. So call the branch manager, explain to her what was going on, and she's like, okay, yeah, I'll send you to Fort Rucker. I was like, okay, cool, great. So I call up the DES guys, and I'm like, okay, I got to Fort Rucker, and he's like, well, okay, I just looked at your profile again. You're not Mike Model qualified. We really need you to be Mike Model qualified. I'm like, all right, cool. So I called the branch manager up, send him all the email traffic, and she's like, okay, I'll give you a Mike Model slot. So I got Rucker again, got the Mike Model slot. I'm like, all right, cool, I'm set. So I PCS, and I get down there, go through the Mike Model course, and the DS guy was like, yeah, we're full up now. But and I'm like, oh shit, man. So then I found myself back on the flight line teaching
Yeah.
Flight School 21 again. It was like Groundhog's Day. So that wasn't super fun, but it did keep me close, because my kids they live at Fort Campbell,
Mm,
so that was Rutgers probably the closest
yeah.
other duty station to Fort Campbell,
Hmm.
so that was a positive.
Yeah, it's hard when you're trying to get that one perfect job in the army because all the parts are moving around you, and you're just trying to navigate all these things that are whizzing past you and trying to stay on target. And I've certainly had that happen too, where over the course of months, something that was easily obtainable, and now it's a little bit off, and next thing you know, you're completely out of sync with it. So yeah, I think most of us who've done a career in the military can absolutely uh, commiserate with you on that one.
Well, it's always, I totally get it. Like, the army needs what it needs.
Yeah,
Like you're not here to get your dream job all the time,
right.
but at least try to. If you got two guys and one wants to go to Bragg and one wants to go to,
Yeah,
you know, a
seems like an easy fix.
drum, don't send one to where he doesn't want to go. If you can support it, make it happen.
Yeah,
Because the happier you keep guys, the better they're going to perform. That's my opinion. But
yeah, absolutely. Hell, that's science. Like,
yeah, right.
and I've known guys too. I've known command sergeant majors who, I should say sergeants major, who same thing happened to them. You got a guy in the seat, and they're going to move him to another place, and at that other place, they got a guy coming to fill his seat, and neither of them want to leave. It seems like an
Yep.
easy fix, but nope, we're going to do it anyway. And yeah, I think there's certainly, not to bash the military, but there's certainly a culture problem right now when it comes to things like that, particularly in aviation, because you see it in the other
Yeah.
branches as well. Pilots leaving in droves, and a lot of it has to do with little things like that, and they're easy fixes that if you would just
Yeah,
do
they
this,
really are.
because it's not money. I mean, I think the Air Force has proven that to us time and again. They throw gobs of money at pilots, and they're still getting out. And
Yeah.
you can't scratch your head and say, well, gee, I wonder what it is. Well, I don't know. Maybe talk to them, find out.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yep. Well,
yeah,
if
it's
the
frustrating.
Army loses all of its pilots, it's still the Army.
So
Yeah.
so it has been said. So it has been said.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess now there's a thing. They're offering up. You can join the guard and not lose your pension. If you want to fly in the guard. I think
Really?
something just came out about that, which is tempting, but I don't want to go to JRTC and I don't want to deploy.
Yeah,
It's like
that's
if you can
true.
give me a guard job where I'm flying, send me to IPC, I'll fly whatever and do some stateside stuff. But yeah, then you start thinking about all that other stuff that you're gonna have to go through, and like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I miss flying Blackhawks like
Sure.
crazy.
Yeah.
If I had the chance, I mean, now that you just told me that, I'm gonna look it up and see what's going on, because I really do just miss flying that Blackhawk.
Yeah.
It's just a great helicopter.
So what's next for you?
Uh, so I retired. Um, my last day in the Army was New Year's Eve of 2019.
Hmm.
So I got out. I went up to Infinity and started training up there, and then COVID happened right in the middle of it. So, I had like a job offer, and I had multiple job offers. And then COVID happened, and everybody's like, "Hey, we don't need you anymore. We'll call you though
Mm.
if we do." So, I just, man, I know a lot of guys took flying jobs like that back down at Rucker, but there was
Yeah.
no way I was moving back to Alabama. Just not
Yeah.
going to happen. I knew a lot of guys took like EMS flying jobs, stuff like that, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So, and of course, nobody knew how long the COVID thing was going to last, so I just kind of held out. Started going back to school, like to finish up my degree, use that GI Bill. That's what I was doing during COVID. Also, you know, COVID really wasn't, and it wasn't that bad for me. For me, I'm just saying
Mm.
personally,
Sure.
wasn't bad for me. Like I reconnected with my kids. I spent more time with my family than I ever had in all my working years. Because I had that time.
Yeah.
Um, and nobody that I personally knew got critically ill or died from COVID or anything. And I'm not saying like if you lost somebody to COVID, I get it, man. That sucks. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying for me personally, it wasn't bad. It was like a blessing in disguise.
Right.
Um, but I'm ready to get back to work and do something with
Yeah.
my life. So I start um, ground school with SkyWest um, on the 24th of August.
No,
Uh,
that's great.
get that ball rolling again.
No, that's great. And of course, as we talked about, I'll be heading up to Infinity here soon too. So, looking forward to
Yeah,
that. And I agree with you. That it's not about whether you believe in COVID or not. Because there's everyone's got opinions about it, but it has
yeah,
been feast or famine as far as the experience. And I share the same experience where I'm still active duty. I was at the Joint Readiness Training Center when all that stuff started, and I mean, all the rotation stopped. And if you're an OC and there's no rotation, there's really nothing to do. And so it was several months of
yeah,
basically just sitting around, and then to move back to Bragg, where I'm at now, and the current position that I'm in, where they don't really have much either going on either. So I'm with you, where I'm strangely I'm ready to get back into work and do something else as I retire and transition. But yeah, no, it's great. That's great news, and it's great for guys like us at the airlines and all the other flying jobs are kind of getting back
oh
into
yeah,
the swing of things. I mean, it's a prime time to get back into
yeah.
it.
I think it's going to be more urgent to get pilots than it was before because COVID forced all
Yeah,
those. Then forced, but there's a lot of voluntary early
yeah,
retirements and stuff like that. Uh,
yeah, yeah. The numbers
I,
seem to
I think,
pan out for that. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, it's definitely was it a buyer's market? If we're the buyers as
yeah,
pilots,
yeah. It's the pilots
right?
market.
Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a pilot's market. I like it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate you taking the time and telling us a little bit about your experiences, and that's the whole point of the show, is to capture all this stuff, because I've talked to so many guys that and I was guilty of it too. Is we didn't write stuff down, we didn't take pictures when we
oh
should
yeah,
have, and next thing you know, it's 30, 40 years later, and you're like, man, I wish I had done those things. So this is kind
yeah,
of my
definitely.
way to help do that, and catch some of this stuff before we all get too old to remember it.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Yeah. No, thank you for having me on. It was a blast. Um, I'm gonna have to check out a lot more of these episodes.
Well, I appreciate Brendan taking some time and coming onto the show and talking to us about his experiences. It was a pretty hellacious battle, and I can tell you from personal experience, that area there in sort of central Afghanistan is pretty wicked. Some interesting terrain there, and kind of one of those places where if something happens to you, you're pretty far from anybody who can do anything about it for a while. So it's definitely not a place you want to screw around. And we definitely had our fair share of events happening in that area, so it's kind of good to hear that some big bearded guys with guns went in there and kind of cleaned out a little bit. Just want to say thanks again for everyone who's listening, leaving ratings. I hope you guys are enjoying the show so far. We've got a few more guests lined up here as we complete season 1. Looking to do 24 episodes. Hopefully I can get those all knocked out before I head on up to school. And then we'll take a small break, as I've told you, and then we'll start back up, hopefully around October timeframe. Just a reminder that the views expressed by the guest and host are their own, do not represent the Department of Defense or any private businesses. Thanks a lot for listening, for supporting the show, and we will talk to you guys again soon. Take care.